All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to this explainer of Elias J.J.J. Thorne's absolutely brilliant philosophical sci-fi narrative, The Descent Meridian. Picture this for a second. What if you discovered a secret so impossibly huge that it completely rewrites the entire history of our planet? And in the process, it might just destroy your own grip on reality. Well, if that sparks your curiosity, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're taking a literal and conceptual descent straight into the unknown. We're going to unpack a story that balances right on that thrilling, uncomfortable edge between hard scientific exploration and deep, mind-bending philosophical mystery.
Right off the bat, Thorne completely hooks us with his haunting dedication. It reads, "For the ones who went down and did not come back, and for the ones who came back changed enough that it amounts to the same thing." I mean, wow. It perfectly sets up the massive psychological stakes of the journey we're about to take. Because as you'll see, this isn't just an explainer about some geographical expedition. It's a deep dive into what happens to the human mind when it bumps up against something that is categorically beyond its understanding. We aren't just talking about physical survival here, we are literally talking about the survival of the self.
So part 1, the setup and the surface.
This is where we are introduced to the highly enigmatic Ida Crane and the Meridian Foundation, a totally off-the-books organization that has been preparing for this specific event for over a century. Crane puts together a very specific, carefully curated team. On the surface, it makes sense. You've got Callum Voss, a master explorer, Sable Meridian, a brilliant geochemist, Piotr Zand, an engineer, Dr. Yara Osei, a systems philosopher, and Felix Ash, a documentary filmmaker. But here's the catch the source material reveals. They weren't just picked for their resumes. They were chosen because every single one of them has already touched the edge of the unknown, and they've suffered for it. They all have what Dr. Osei calls cracks. They face mockery, isolation, or their careers were totally derailed just because they stumbled on things that weren't supposed to exist. The Foundation didn't want perfectly put together people. They specifically wanted people whose cracks would actually allow the unknown to enter.
And that brings up this really fascinating distinction, signal versus noise. You know when you're tuning a radio in your car and you just hit a patch of heavy static? Most of us just change the station, right? We treat it as an annoying glitch. Well, in standard academia, if there's an anomalous reading that defies all known geological models, it gets treated the exact same way. It's dismissed as noise, a total fluke. And if you dare to publish it, it's a career ender. But the Meridian Foundation, they operate on a completely different logic. They believe that these career-ending anomalies are actually signals. They are pointing to a massive hidden truth. So what the rest of the academic world rejects, the Foundation actively collects.
Moving on to part 2, the descent and the door.
Okay, so the assembled team gets into this highly advanced elevator cab, and they travel down a perfectly engineered shaft into a geological space that is completely unprecedented. Get this number in your head, 3,847. That is the exact depth in meters where the team is finally deposited. Just sit with the sheer physical isolation of that for a second. That is almost 4 kilometers straight down into solid rock. Down there, temperature and electromagnetic readings just completely stop making natural sense. And at the absolute bottom of the shaft, built directly into the living stone, they find it. A massive, waiting door made of an iron-nickel alloy.
Now, if you or I found a perfectly smooth metal door 4 kilometers underground, our immediate first thought would probably be, okay, aliens, right? But Sable Meridian, our geochemist, poses a theory that is honestly way more unsettling. She looks at the mineral signature and determines that it is absolutely not extraterrestrial, meaning it didn't come from off-planet. It's actually pre-terrestrial, meaning this material was laid down before the Earth even finished forming into the planet it remembers itself to be. This door has been waiting here, buried in the deep structure of the world for over 2.5 billion years.
And here's the craziest part. The door isn't just sitting there passively. It has markings on it that physically shift and rearrange in these alternating intervals. First 40 minutes, then 37 minutes, then 42 minutes. Sable and Dr. Osei quickly realize these are not random mechanical glitches. They actually form a carrier wave. The door isn't a static lock at all. It's a dynamic, highly active system, and it is literally scanning the team. It's learning their cognitive structures and building a language out of their presence just so it can speak back to them. So this brings us to a crucial concept Dr. Osei defines as threshold logic. The door isn't a mechanical barrier that you just open with a key or a password. It's an active interface operating entirely on the reasoning of the boundary. It's literally waiting for the right combination of preparedness and understanding from the specific people standing in front of it. It doesn't open because they push a button. It opens because the gap between the visitor's understanding and the door's own state has finally closed. Basically, it just recognizes their readiness.
Which brings us to Part 3, the planetary archive. The door finally opens, and the team crosses the threshold, and they step into a room that completely ignores physical dimensions. We're talking true non-Euclidean space here. Inside, there's this glowing column of light, which introduces us to the mind-bending concept of deep time memory. This is the idea that a sufficiently complex system doesn't need to store information on a computer hard drive or even in a biological brain. Instead, it actually retains billions of years of experiential information right in its fundamental physical structure. This column they're looking at, it isn't a machine. It is the physical manifestation of pure, concentrated communication.
And this leads to just an absolute knockout of a realization from Dr. Osei. She says, "A planet thinks. We are the thoughts it is having about itself." Let that sink in. This anomaly, it's not a message from aliens. It is the Earth's own accumulated self-modeling, built up over billions of years. Thorne's idea is that when a planetary system reaches a certain depth and complexity, it begins to model itself. It creates an archive of interiority, collecting the experiences of every intelligence that has ever passed through it.
This is exactly what planetary self-knowledge is. The team hasn't just walked into some ancient building. They have walked into a living, breathing archive of inner experience. When Callum Voss actually reaches out and touches the glowing column, he doesn't just read historical data like a Wikipedia page. He instantly downloads the exact lived experience of Heinrich Mobius, a 19th century Austrian geologist who touched that exact same column over a century ago. Callum literally feels what it was like to be Mobius in that very moment. The archive doesn't trade in data. It exchanges pure experience.
And the sheer scale of this thing is staggering. Sable reveals that this door they found is actually just the center point of a massive planet-wide network. There are 17 of these nodes distributed globally, all arranged in this deep structure helical geometry that spirals all the way down to this exact convergence point at 3,847 meters. It functions exactly like an organic internet made out of the Earth itself, and it's been accumulating the history of consciousness for 2.5 billion years. As Osei points out so brilliantly, they thought they were down there investigating the archive, but really, the archive was already investigating them. All right, Part 4, the cost of return.
So the team obviously can't stay down in the archive forever. Well, actually, Felix Ash, the filmmaker, does choose to stay, leaving behind his life's unfilmable work. But the rest of the team must face the ascent, and returning to the surface introduces this incredibly heavy concept, vindication cost. Imagine being right about something that completely destroyed your life, only to find out that being proven right doesn't actually fix a single thing. That is the emotional price they pay. Sable Meridian was mocked and pushed out of academia for her data on this pre-terrestrial material. Now she returns with absolute, undeniable proof, but her triumphant publication is totally lonely, because the data can only explain the measurements. It can't convey the profound reality-shattering experience she actually had. The cost of vindication is carrying a truth that the world's academic structures are simply too small to hold.
In the aftermath of the expedition, each survivor desperately tries to translate the impossible weight of their discovery back into the common air of the surface world. Sable publishes her irrefutable data on the global network. Piotr spends years in Portugal building this massive, strange architectural structure that physically embodies the non-Euclidean geometry they witnessed. Dr. Osei somehow manages to compress all of her universe-altering theories into a tiny, incredibly dense 104-page book. And Callum Voss, he just retreats to the sea in Norderney, writing a private testimony of his encounter just to get the crushing weight of it out of his chest and into his hands.
All of this circles back to the absolute core philosophical dilemma of the text, known as the Mobius problem, named, of course, after that first 19th century geologist who went down and never came back. It perfectly describes the impossible burden of returning from an encounter so vast and so profound that ordinary life just becomes completely unlivable. Felix Ash solved it by choosing to stay. The others, they're left attempting the brutal everyday discipline of returning. They are trying to carry a piece of infinity back into a normal world of ordinary daylight and disinterested security guards.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question. The Descent Meridian isn't just about a weird door deep underground. It is a profound look at the absolute limits of human knowledge and the ultimate cost of true discovery. Think about it. If you touch the memory of the world, would you have the discipline to carry that weight back to the surface, knowing that absolutely no one could ever truly understand it? Or would you, like Felix Ash and Heinrich Mobius, choose to leave the surface behind for good and become a permanent thought in the mind of the planet? It's an incredibly fascinating question from a truly brilliant narrative. Thanks for exploring it with me today.